Digital art is pretty much defined as editing, right? Or changing existing imagery. So where video art to me is like creating new visuals, let's say, or using existing visuals. This is about taking visuals and altering them. Probably one of the best examples I can show you is someone like Paul Pfeiffer, who uses digital suites, things like Photoshop, etc., to take existing imagery and alter it, negate things, erase things, so on and so forth. So he's taking images that have already been created by other people, like sports images. He's very well known for using sports events, basketball games, or one of his favorites, hockey games. And what he'll do is erase out various images to create something new, and often severely mesmerizing in its own way. For instance, in this frame, the still that you're seeing, what he did was take out the hands passing a basketball. So the film reads that this basketball is kind of like hovering and moving and nothing touching it. And it becomes almost this kind of fascinating image. In this piece called Fragment of a Crucifixion, he took out everybody in the scene except this singular basketball player, and he plays them on a loop, kind of moving forward, moving back, moving forward, moving back. So I'm often reminded a little bit of like, Birnbaum's kind of pieces of glitching the image, right? But he takes out every other person on the court, and so he becomes this strange, in a sense, figure kind of in a no man's land, right? Where's everybody else? What's happening? Why is he screaming or yelling or what is happening here? Moving back and forth, moving back and forth. It becomes almost distressing or anxiety producing when you watch it for long enough. The title, by the way, comes from Francis Bacon's work. Francis Bacon is a painter from the early 20th century who did these very disturbing pieces where it almost looked like bodies are like melting or coming apart. So if you're wondering where the title comes from, you can look up Francis Bacon's work and think a little bit about that. But what Pfeiffer said in his pieces, he said, you can watch some of the videos I gave you with him talking about his pieces. He said, I look at sports as something of a shared language that even if you're not into sports, you've been exposed to them. And I sort of laughed when I first was watching his interviews. Like, yeah, you're right. Like, even though I'm not a sports person, I definitely have been exposed to them. Where, there was gym class, are you going to get picked for kickball? By the way, I was always like one of the last people picked for kickball, if you want to know my opinion on sports. I'm not much of an organized anything person, and definitely not athletic. So I was thinking in my head, like, yeah, like even if you're not into sports, you're not athletic, you were forced into it a little bit. You had to participate. Where art, I'd argue, is no. It's always considered optional. It's off on the side somewhere. So he said, I took something that I think everyone's exposed to, and a majority of people enjoy or connect to. And then I thought about these images almost like, looking at a fire, that it's comforting, it's available. We watch TV just to have something on in the background. We might put on a game, basketball game, just for the noise. And I was like, oh, what this guy's doing is it's tapping into a shared heritage, perhaps a shared American, heritage, and then playing from that point by altering it and making it disturbing, anxiety ridden, not quite what we expect. So I like his work. I think he's definitely found an interesting area to use that's often not used in art. Sports don't usually show up. By the way, you can go back and look at Matthew Barney. He actually used a lot of sports imagery in his earliest pieces. He was very interested in what he called like the masculine, as he put it, the sporting masculine. Um, and again, this was back in the 90s where, terms like toxic masculinity, et cetera, didn't exist yet. So Barney also played a little bit with the masculinity theme as well. But I think Pfeiffer, he found something unique to use and found, the way to use digital tools in a unique, interesting kind of way. This is Corey Arcangel, and he works with video game imagery. So once again, kind of maybe a shared language. Because, I grew up playing Super Mario Brothers, the earliest ones, the originals, on my Nintendo. And I think that, you can kind of talk to anybody across all age groups from Gen X on down, and we'll all say, yeah, I know what Super Mario Brothers is, or some version of it, right? Mario Kart, something. um, up to the most recent iterations. And, you know, to use this again, I think people walk in the gallery and maybe they're afraid of art. Their art's not for me. I'm not supposed to come into these spaces. And then they see the floating clouds that they're familiar with, and they hear the music, you know, and we're like, oh, okay, I know this. I can like this. What he does is he takes the video stream of what you would see playing the games, and then he removes things. So just like Pfeiffer, he takes things out. So in this piece he did for the Whitney Biennial in 2004, he just left the clouds. So the music plays, it scrolls, but you never see Mario or Luigi. You never see, you know, any of the architectural elements. You don't see any of that stuff. The blocks, none of it. You just see clouds over and over and over again. And he did different iterations where sometimes he leaves certain things in, sometimes he takes things out. Sometimes he lets the characters be in it, sometimes not, you know, so it varies. But I love the shot I used with the woman standing in front, because I think it's almost becomes a world you can be immersed in. And for some of us, that's extremely nostalgic, or it's extremely relevant because, you know, of when we played these games. I remember when I heard that Universal, I think it was Universal, was doing like a Super Mario World, and I was like, oh, I like that. You know, it's a nostalgic thing. So do we want to be part of these worlds? Do we want to be in games? Yeah, maybe. Which leads me to Calfee again, and her piece that she did called RMB City, where she created imagery in the program Second Life, where some people spend quite a bit of time creating universes and literally second lives, we might say. And I had mentioned that I'm interested in, you know, what is reality anymore? For some people, it's becoming a very flexible statement. And each year it becomes more and more flexible. I mean, now we literally have virtual reality, you know? You can wear the little glasses and, you know. So where is all this going? Like, will we function in the flesh for much longer? Some people ask. Is irrelevant. But in RMB City, she gives this kind of like, the way I put it is a phantasmagoria of all things Asian, all things Chinese. You have like the Shanghai Tower, you have the bird's nest kind of crumpling into the water, you have the Forbidden City, you have, you know, all the panda. You have all the best and the worst stereotypes all slamming up against one another in this crazy, crazy, crazy digital environment. And when I saw this, I was like, oh my God, this is brilliant. You know, this is where we're going as artists. And it's just as relevant as making a painting in a lot of ways. So I definitely urge you to go check out this work as well. And then it leads us into a conversation about like internet and interactive art. Internet art is, again, one of those things like I can't totally pin it down for you, or it's constantly evolving. So what I try to do is find a couple examples that have been what we call archived. Because internet art's interesting because, you know, how do you own it? It's just like conceptual art. And how do you own it when the platforms where they used to live die? Like when I was in college, right towards the end of college and into my master's, you know, this is when the internet was first kind of really gearing up, the end of the 90s, right? And you had things like Netscape. Everyone used Netscape. I bet you don't even know Netscape. Why would you? You know Safari. You know Chrome. Why would you know this browser? Maybe you do. If you do, good on you, man. But the idea of like, you know, how do you document internet art when the programming language is dead or the site that hosted it was dead? Well, you archive it. You know, you archive it. You put it somewhere so you can look at it. So I'm always fascinated with internet art now because it's constantly evolving and changing and being archived and being reborn. And, you know, this piece by Vukusic was done referencing Documenta. By the way, Documenta is one of the big art shows that happens in the art world. There's like the Venice Biennale, there's the Whitney Biennial, there's Documenta, there's Art Basel. So people that do my job, we know the big ones, and Documenta is definitely one of them. It happens in Kassel, Germany. Big deal. So this was a piece where Kozik basically archived the Documenta site, which was then archived as internet art. It's just hilarious. But you would go there and it would say Documenta done. You know, Documenta done. Another piece that I pulled out to show you is from the figures of Abe Lincoln and Jim Punk. By the way, I don't even know who Jim Punk is still to this day. And it was a site called Screenful. And notice this one was down on Internet Explorer, so maybe a little more familiar. And it was a piece that basically was about just pulling things from the internet and showing how the internet worked. It was like, it's like pop culture threw up, on a screen. And you look at this stuff, like I remember seeing this image and being like, oh God, Paris Hilton, like that's hot. It just, it's about like how the internet, used to work, and then having all these images bang up against one another, and think about it through the lens of a blog, or a MySpace or things like this. And so they were showing basically how the internet was being used at this time. And I would say back in the late 90s, early 2000s, a lot of the content on the internet was not very useful. It was really with the launching of like Wikipedia and other things like that that you started to see knowledge, right, online. But before this, you had things like MySpace, and it was just a lot of imagery, and it was a lot of just people talking about things, blogging about things, more so than it being like a place to really discover real information. Now, today, you can Google almost any question and get an answer. I mean, it's for someone like me, I'm like, wow, it's amazing. Because again, it's not how it originally worked. Um, so this kind of takes you back to those early days and makes you think about the glossiness, right, of the early internet, might we say. Interactive art, I wanted to show you Mel Chin. And Mel Chin is one of my favorite artists because he's a malleable artist who does so many different things. So I can't recommend enough just going and looking at Mel Chin's work. But I picked this project called the Nomad Project because it was a piece that he created to be interactive. It's like a video game. And you'll notice you're playing the video game kind of on the screen, sitting in the chair, kind of old school arcade looking setup. And then on the floor around you are these rugs, and you're kind of in a tent. He created a video game. He said he wanted to put together the idea of gaming with art. And so he made it a game where you have to run around and collect these nomadic carpets. So carpets that you would find in like Islamic culture. And you could collect them and you could gain points and level up and all these things. And so here are some screenshots from some of the game part of what he created. So he said, I wanted to create something where, it was a game and it was gamified, as they say today, but it was cultural at the same time, and then bring people into that experience. And as they gamed and had fun, they learned. They're finding more and more, if you build educational materials in this way, you can reach people. I don't know. I'm still kind of one of those people like, I don't know if like, education to me has to be a circus all the time, but I see people's point also on the other end. So I'm kind of like a mixed bag on this. But I do know that, the talk of gamification and like things like earning badges, things like this, they say that this engages people, and so they'll actually maybe want to know more about what you're trying to teach them. So again, I'm sort of a split opinion of this, but I'm willing to be open-minded and kind of think about this through someone like Chin's work about like, does this open the door to wanting to engage with art more because it's made kind of fun. And then the final piece I want to show you is by Julian Popp. It's a piece that he created that uses water sprayers to spray out words. And the words are taken from the internet. So every day it's hooked up to a computer, and the water sprayers are keyed into all the top searched words that are happening in that moment in time. So I can't think of anything that's much more technological or much more interactive than this piece, as it pulls from the internet and shows you a visual representation of like who we are, what are we searching for. So, and it's to me just a kind of like a starkly, weirdly beautiful piece as well. So I hope you enjoyed learning about video, digital, interactive, and internet art. And again, there's a lot more out there that you could research and investigate. I wanted to create a lecture that hopefully wouldn't go more than an hour. But there's always more out there. It's being constantly created. So hopefully this inspires you to go take a look around for yourself.